So for more on this, we've reached Karen Hodges in Kelowna, BC. She's a professor of conservation ecology at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, it's a pleasure.
So first of all, I'm hoping you can break down for us what happens to wildlife species during a wildfire.
So when I think about wildlife and wildfire, I think about during the fire and after the fire. And after the fire often has much longer and bigger consequences. During a fire, it's a lot like what people are doing right now, evacuation. You carried stories about mortalities that happen. That happens for wildlife too. The smoke that I'm breathing this morning is affecting our pets, our livestock, our wildlife. They also struggle with breathing this toxic air. After a wildfire, though, is where my major concern is, because many of these species need mature forest, and it takes decades to a century for that mature forest to regrow after these really severe wildfires. We're in a global biodiversity crisis. Many species are at risk of extinction because of habitat loss, and these wildfires are contributing to that habitat loss.
So in terms of the safety of these species, are there some species of wildlife, some animals that may not survive what we've witnessed happening, for example?
It's hard to tie an extinction to any one fire event. I know they're trying to do that in Lahaina. They've been talking a lot about an endangered bird that is really at the edge of extinction. In BC, it's more cumulative. And so I'm watching species like fisher, which is a large member of the weasel family and is at risk of extinction in the province. Canada lynx are a major concern in Washington. They're federally threatened down there. Wildfire, we know, is damaging to their habitats. I have a student studying western screech owls. They're federally threatened in Canada. And we know a number of nests that she was studying earlier this summer have been burned in these fires. So, event after event after event, and there comes a point when the species just runs out of habitat.
Is it sort of a sense also, I guess, similar to humans, but a sense of sort of migrating and adapting to new environments because the previous one they were living in is destroyed? When we look at those images, from parts of the Northwest Territories, from parts of British Columbia, it is, as you noted, going to take a long time to see growth there again.
I wish it were that easy, but many of these species really do need that mature forest, and they just are not well suited to living in younger forest. So these are genuine, long-lasting losses of habitat for these species, which means much smaller populations, which runs into problems of, is there going to be inbreeding? Are there going to be, just a couple of chance events that individuals die and you lose a population in a region? I see that you're scrolling pictures of caribou. They are under immense pressure across the country, and there is genuine concern we will lose caribou herds because of loss of habitat, and that basically any fire could be enough to tip a herd over the edge. So that we are running the risk in British Columbia of losing between 15 and 50% of our forest in the next century. And that's because of wildfire and then not regrowing forest at all, because we might have places that are too hot or too dry, or we can't get enough seeds in, or the forest starts to regrow and burns again. So these are genuine, permanent losses for the species that need mature forest.
Finally, I wanted to ask you, in terms of this, what is being done right now? I know you said you're watching closely what's happening, the patterns, also in terms of how wildlife is moving here with these sorts of disaster events. What is being done right now to ensure that these species do survive and are able to continue despite the fact that their habitat has been so devastatingly damaged?
Not nearly enough. So in British Columbia, we don't even have an endangered species law. Federally, we do have the Species at Risk Act, but it is relatively weak at handling this kind of ongoing and accelerating change. So, what I'm doing as a scientist and many of my colleagues are doing is continuing to document what is happening. We need good, credible scientific information about where species are and how many we've got of each species, and then trying to advocate for protecting the residual patches of habitat they can use. Much more deeply, we as a society in Canada and countries around the world have to handle climate change. These fires and the increase in hurricanes are all symptoms of the same problem, and that is the rapid climate change we're experiencing. So that's the big one we just have to tackle.
Karen, thank you so much for this discussion. I appreciate your time.